Welcome to the Real Estate Finder podcast. I'm Matthew Maschler, real estate broker with Signature Real Estate Finder here in the great state of Florida. And with me, the co-host for the day, Preston Smith. Hey, Preston, how are you?
I'm good. How are you, Matt?
I'm doing all right, We got one of my agents asked me a question, and I figured I would fire up the podcast machine and make a record of it. That way he can play it for his customer or his friend that's asking the question. So I'm going to read out the question now, and then we will discuss. Hey, Matt, my friend, let's call him Ace. My friend Ace is currently doing a rent-to-own on his house. The roof is in a really bad state, and he wants the landlord to fix it before the sale at the end of the year. My first thought was to tell him to check what the contract says, but is there anything he can do? He mentioned the price of the house is $280,000, or the appraisal price, whatever is lower, and he already has equity in the house from the rent he has paid. Just wondering if you had any insight on this. And so let's talk about renting to own. Generally, when hey Neil, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Neil just walked into the podcast studio. All right. So generally, when you rent to own, you're paying a little bit higher than market rate for the rent, but some amount of the rent being paid is being held, not really being held. It's not held in a separate account, but it's going to be credited to you as the buyer if you decide to purchase the house at the end of the lease. I don't love rent-to-own contracts for either side. I don't love it for the seller because what if the value of the property goes up, right? If the value of the property goes up, you're a forced seller. And if the value goes down, tenant's not going to buy your property, right? So also, the other reason I don't love rent to own is because now you're negotiating a purchase price that you may never have the purchase price, right? You may never actually purchase it. So why put all that energy into a negotiation to negotiate the terms of a contract that may or may not ever happen? However, a lot of sophisticated landlords do like rent to own because they can charge above market rent, right? On the theory that since some of that money is going to go down to the down payment, right, a person might want to pay that above market rent to create their deposit. And if the tenant doesn't actually close, right, doesn't have the money, doesn't have enough money to close, the landlord collected all that additional rent for the year, and they can go out and do it again. But okay, this is the situation we're in. Ace has the right to buy the unit at the end of the year for $280,000, and he's wondering, can he ask the landlord to fix the roof? Well, he can ask anything, right? But unless it's written in the contract, you're not entitled to it. And as a landlord, I wouldn't have any negotiation on the condition of the property because you, the tenant, have been living in the property for months. You know the condition. The only question is, do you want to buy it? And obviously, if the market has gone up, landlord doesn't want to sell, right? If the house is now worth $350, landlord doesn't want to sell for $280, right? He has to, but he's not going to put any money into the negotiation. Why would he? Why would he make it easier for the tenant or a better deal for the tenant who's going to buy that property for under market or with money, right? Even if the property's worth $280, right? Landlord's hoping the tenant walks away, and that additional rent goes right into the landlord's pocket. So the landlord has no incentive to make a repair unless it's written in the contract. On the flip hand, the tenant has every incentive to try to close because there's a value to not having to move. The time, energy, and effort in moving and finding a different place, looking for new properties, negotiating a new deal, and then actually moving, right? Even if the value of the house went down a little bit, the tenant may want to go ahead and buy the property. So your first thought was right. If there's something in the contract that says what the landlord has to do, then certainly then the contract controls. So the first thought was right, but ultimately, there's no incentive for the landlord to fix anything. Right? I'm sorry, I got distracted because the phone's ringing and an offer came on a messenger. I shut my cell phone off, but the landline and my phone messenger were ringing, so I got to ignore these outside influences. So there's no incentive for the landlord to make those repairs because the landlord probably doesn't even want the tenant to purchase the property, because if they walk away, the landlord gets to keep that excess money. If the property went up, the landlord could sell it for more money. And if the property went down, the tenant probably won't want to close on a below market unless it's just going down a little bit, and the convenience for the tenant, so that they don't have to move again, the time, energy, and expense of moving can convince the tenant to buy or pay a little bit of a premium. You did say something in the question that the purchase price is the lower of 280 and the appraisal. So the first thing I would say to the customer, the person asking the question, is, what does the contract say? The second thing I'd say is, you may not be able to negotiate, right? Because why would the landlord negotiate? But here's the action item. The action item is, because it's the lower of 280, 280 or the appraised value, now you have something you can use to lower the purchase price. Get that appraisal done, because if that appraisal comes in lower than 280, I gotta figure stuff out about the phone. If that appraisal comes in lower than 280, now you have something, right? And even if the market value of the property is 280, but the appraiser says that the condition of the roof is so old and in such bad shape that he can only appraise it at 250. Now you have something, right? Now that the landlord has an incentive to go out and change the roof. It would be better for the landlord to change the roof and for you to buy it for 280 than to just lower the purchase price to 250. Why? Because I'm assuming Ace doesn't have the 30K to pay for the new roof, right? He's going to want to finance that. So you want to negotiate that. You want the landlord to pay for the new roof. And even if, let's say the appraisal comes in at 250 and the cost of the roof is 50, right? Even if the landlord has to pay for the new roof and you go for a $300,000 purchase price, now you're financing $300,000, you make your down payment, and you can buy the house. So it's really step two, right? Get the appraisal. The appraisal's low because of the roof, and then convince the landlord to put on the new roof, and then you finance the purchase price of the house with the new roof, because that way you don't have to go out of pocket or find a secondary loan for the 30K. So while the landlord doesn't have the incentive to make any repairs, the best course of action is to get that appraisal and hope that the appraisal comes in lower than the 280, and you use that to convince the landlord to make the necessary repairs. So I just had this conversation with one of my agents, and I said, man, I wish I fired up my podcast machine so I could record that, get that out for posterity. Preston, you listen to all that. What do you think? Do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions right now. It's interesting because we don't see a lot of rent to own options here or in the market lately. But I feel like I'm seeing it become more popular, more requested. So it's going to be interesting to see how those things pan out in the future.
I hate rent to own because you really have to find two parties that both want it, right?
Yeah.
If a person wants to sell their property, they don't want to rent it out.
Yeah.
If a person wants to rent it out, they don't want to sell. And going through all that work to negotiate a future purchase price, it's never you never get to all the terms that you need.
Yeah.
But it is a common investment tool, and I don't know it's been around a long time to
Uh-huh.
offer for a sophisticated landlord to offer the rent to own, to prey on the tenant's dream of one day getting home ownership, to pay a little bit of an increased rent, that increased rent going to a possible down payment, and the landlord hoping that the tenant does not buy it, and then the landlord goes and finds somebody else to do it with. But when I have a buyer or a tenant lead, and the person says, "I'd really like a rent to own situation," it's hard enough to find a rental. It's hard enough. It's hard enough to find them. It's hard enough to find them a rental. Then also now that I have your rental, let me tell you how bad your house is while I negotiate a future purchase price. I love the house enough to rent it, but it's so bad. When I'm negotiating a purchase price, I want to beat the seller up. So, why would I want to beat the seller up at the beginning of a tenancy? So, it doesn't make sense to me. What are your thoughts, Neil? Have you ever rent when you were renting property? Did you ever rent to own or look for rent to own?
So yeah, the house that I live in now, I originally started out renting, and then I purchased it.
Right,
but it was not in the lease to rent to own.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us on the Real Estate Finder podcast. I hope you enjoyed listening to this as much as I enjoyed talking to you about it. And we will see you soon. Feel free to ask your questions in the comments or email us at sales@realestatefinder.com.
The future looks bright and the storms pass by. The sky's dark blue and it's almost that time. Light shows, cameras flash when I pass. Living in the moment, forget about the past. They save the best for last. Matthew Mania, we about to make a splash. Life is a marathon full of sharp turns. Gotta keep pace while the hands on the clock turns. High stakes, 5-star real estate. I run a show, you can tell the boss in a place. Electricity, energy, it vibrates. I'm always on time even if I'm late. I make dreams come true. Living my life, hope the same for you. Success in my sights, got a real clear view. If you don't know the time, I'll give you a clue. You know what time, you know what time, you know what time it is. Yeah. You know what time, you know what time, you know what time it is. You know what time, you know what time, you know what time it is. You know what time, you know what time, you know what time it is. You know what time it is. You know whose time it is. You know what time it is. Matthew Mania, the time is his. You know what time it is. You know whose time it is. You know what time it is.